Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here with my spoiler-free review of The Blinding Knife, the second book in the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks. So this video will have two different sections. I will start off the video by talking about my overall thoughts and feelings on this book, and it will be completely spoiler-free for those of you who haven't read the first book in the series, The Black Prism. And then the second part of the review, which will probably be the larger portion of the review, will be my spoiler-free thoughts on this book, but I will go into more specifics, so that section is going to be more for people who have read The Black Prism. I know it can be really hard to find like completely spoiler-free reviews, so I want to have a little section of that, but obviously it's really hard to review a sequel without talking about some things that have happened in the first book. And for those of you who have read The Blinding Knife and want to know my spoilery thoughts, I am also filming a spoilery book chat, so definitely go check that video out if you want to know more of my specific thoughts on this book. I do also have a spoiler-free review and a spoilery book chat for the first book in the series, which I will link for you down below and probably in the corner in case you guys want to check that out. Okay, starting with my completely spoiler-free thoughts. Let's start with a star rating. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, and I honestly had a lot of mixed feelings about it. There were some things that I enjoyed, but there were also a number of things that I did not enjoy. I found this book overall to be really disappointing after reading the first book because I thought the first book was fascinating, it was fast-paced, I had so much fun reading that, I gave it 4 stars. And this one, I thought the pacing was a lot slower, especially in the first half of the book, but really throughout the whole thing. You do learn more about the world in this book, and I love world building. I love ever-expanding worlds and magic systems, so I did enjoy learning more about the world and magic system, but at the same time, I feel like some of it was done in a way that I didn't enjoy. It just was very obvious the tools that Brent Weeks was using to teach me about the world. For example, there is a school setting in this book, which I generally really enjoy school settings, but I very much felt like many of those scenes in the school setting were there just to teach me about the world because the character is also learning the history of the world. Another device the author used was this card game that was played, and while I found the history aspect of those card games to be mildly interesting, I was also pretty bored and was distracted by the fact that he was using the card game as a way to teach me more about the history of the world. Another thing that really bugged me in this book that only kind of bugged me in the last one, I honestly kind of wrote it off a little bit in the last one, but it was way worse in this book, and that is the sexism that people talk about in this series. In the first book, I really felt like Brent Weeks was definitely objectifying people's bodies, but kind of in a trying to be funny way, and I didn't really find it offensive, but that changed in this book. I definitely found the over-sexualization to be annoying, and on top of that, I felt like a lot of his female characters did not behave in a way that I found very believable. I just didn't think he did a very good job of writing women. Obviously, that's a really personal opinion, but that is definitely how I felt, and I was very frustrated with the over-sexualization and the way that women behaved and were treated in this book. After the end of the first book, there were a lot of things that I was looking forward to, a lot of mysteries and issues that I was really looking forward to being tackled in this book, and the only super non-spoiler way I can talk about this is just to say that a lot of those things just were very anticlimactic for me in this book. A lot of things that I was looking forward to were resolved in a way that I was just like, okay, okay. I will be more specific about that in my spoiler book chat, so if you have read the book, definitely go check that out. So obviously I've said sort of a lot of negative things so far about the book, and that's because for a large majority of this book, I kind of was struggling with it. I almost gave this book a 2-star rating, but There's a big but. The ending. Brent Weeks knows how to do a good ending. The last 5-ish chapters of this book, a lot of things happened. A lot of really interesting things were revealed and happened. And so because of that crazy ending, which the first book also had a crazy ending, I'm now again excited about continuing. Well, I don't know if excited is the right word, but intrigued enough to want to continue on into the next book, because I definitely still have a lot of unanswered questions. That's, I guess, something Brent Weeks does really well. Although some of these unanswered questions I find really frustrating at the same time. Okay, I guess most of the things that I wanted to talk about were actually pretty spoiler free, but I do have a handful of things that I want to talk about that I can only talk about by mentioning things that happened in the first book. So if you haven't read the first book in the series, you probably want to stop watching here. So I mentioned that I really struggled with the pacing in this book. When we end the first book, there is a war beginning. There's a big battle scene, and it's the start of a war. And honestly, for like the first half of this book, I actually completely forgot that we were at war because it was so in the background of what was going on. At the beginning of the book, you have Gavin and Karis, who go and do their own thing for a little bit, and then you have Kip in a school setting. And while I really enjoyed seeing Kip in school and learning more about the world through the school setting, even though I thought it was kind of an obvious world building device, between that and this side thing that Gavin was doing, I totally forgot that there was a war going on and that things needed to happen. And it isn't until like about halfway through the book that that storyline kind of gets picked up again. I also thought that Brent Weeks' characterization of some of these characters wasn't very consistent. I felt like the main character, Kip, was kind of a different person than he was in the first book. Definitely a little more likable in this book than in the first book, but I thought that the change was almost too drastic and so different that it wasn't just that he was growing as a character, but that he just seemed different. It happened way too quickly. Gavin also seemed different in this book. I really liked the things that we learned about Gavin in the first book. I really liked that he was set up to be like this misunderstood bad guy, but I felt like in the second book, we were seeing a different side to him, and he just wasn't who I thought he was, which I'm sure is something that a lot of people really enjoy. But I just kind of felt a little duped because he wasn't behaving in the way that I thought he would. Obviously, really vague. Again, check out my spoilery book chat for more information once you've read the book. Another character I wanted to touch on was Karis. I really liked Karis from the first book, but honestly, she was really disappointing to me in this second book. She is one of the female characters that I mentioned that I didn't find to behave in a believable way, and I honestly found her point of view just so disappointing, and I was really sad because I really liked Karis in the first book. And then you have Andros Guile. He definitely plays a bigger role in this book than he did in the first one. And he's definitely a really interesting villain. I don't think I particularly like him, but I know that he is a favorite villain for a lot of people, and I can totally see why. There are definitely some really interesting developments involving Andros Guile, and he becomes a much more interesting character during this book. So I'm very intrigued to find out what's going to happen with him next. Another thing that I did like about this book is some of the politics. I think some of the politics did go a little bit over my head, but I do appreciate the fact that you have the Chromeria, and then you also have the Color Prince and the things that he is preaching, which all sound very like democratic, and they sound like it's a better way for people to live. And you as the reader just don't really know what is true and what is the better way. Like, is the stuff that the Color Prince is saying and preaching actually true about the Chromeria? I don't know, but I really enjoyed kind of like seeing those two sides of things, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how things end up by the end of the series as far as like the ruling government. Like I said, I do plan to continue on in the series, even though I only gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I've heard so many good things about the rest of this series, and honestly, the world and the magic system are just like so interesting, and I have so many more questions that I really need to be answered. So because of that, I will be continuing on in this series, but I am a little sad that I didn't enjoy this book as much as everyone else seems to have. I feel like a lot of people say that this book, the second one, is better than the first one, and sadly that is not how I felt at all. Anyways, if you guys have read The Blinding Knife or want to read The Blinding Knife, let me know down in the comment section, but please keep your comments spoiler free for this series. If you want to talk spoilers, go over to my spoiler book chat and leave your comment there. Or feel free to DM me on Instagram or Twitter. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye.